Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever time zone you're in, wherever time you are at. Welcome to the seventh episode of the After Game Unwind podcast. And I am happy to say those words again because honestly, it's been since January since the last episode, and I did an episode of LA Noir at that point, and it was a fun episode to do. The last few episodes have been fun to do, even the top 10 Wii and Wii U games were fun. But like I said, I'm here to talk about a few topics that I thought, you know what, let's just get them on my chest. And I'm gonna talk in this episode because, well, I feel as though I want to address these things and I want to get these off my chest and out of my mind. And, I want to share my gaming, experiences, my nuances with you all. So let's go ahead and talk about these particular topics. I've heard a lot of things about the Nintendo Switch 2 all over the internet, and there's been some positives and there's been a lot of negatives and complaints. And I talked about this system back in January, and I didn't really give my thoughts as to what the system was going to be kind of about because we really didn't get any information. But I'm just gonna give it to you in a separate video. I'm just gonna give my brief thoughts about all this, just kind of go on what I know so far. Nintendo really missed the mark at the very end with the Switch because, they did all these great things with it, but, I feel like it was just a missed opportunity. What we got in the trailer was great, and it was about time that Nintendo put their gears together and put it in, in a console. I just feel that it was kind of just like, where was this before? Where was this before? Where was it in the Switch OLED? And that's my biggest kind of complaint when it comes to the Switch 2 whatever like features it had, like where was this in Nintendo Switch 1? I i completely think that Nintendo disregarded all of that when it came to Nintendo Switch 1. And considering that the OLED model was probably the one that could have had more features, that could have had a lot of everything that we fans were promised. And was just it was just kind of like a upgraded screen with nothing else and just a regular Switch in between. That's just it. And I'm kind of disappointed to say that Nintendo like has a track record for these things where they do have great ideas for their next console, but this could have made it into the revision. And looking at the direct and looking at the different videos that have come across recently from other YouTubers, it's just I'm saying like it's great that the Switch 2 has this, and it's about time, really. But at the end of the day, I feel as though it could have been something that Nintendo should have put in the OLED model. Because the OLED model, if I remember correctly, was marketed as some upgrade to the original Nintendo Switch. And that's what it should have been. It should have been that. And Nintendo missed the mark for that one completely when it came to this OLED model in particular. Now, I'm not saying that the Switch 2 is going to be a bad console or anything. It's just, I feel as though Nintendo could have done something of an opportunity with the OLED model to where it had these ideas, but it could have been somewhere in Switch 1, and it's just kind of disappointing to say the least. And I know that the Switch 2 is going to be a little bit better. I'll be honest with you. It kind of looks like the Switch Pro, to be honest. But I have to digress. It's just one of those things that Nintendo should have added very early on. Now, I get that the YouTube copyright system has its flaws. And, I heard it time and time again that the copyright system has had its fair share of flaws and some channels that have been taken down, but you know it's starting to get really just worrying at this point. And I really just want to spread awareness to this. And I know people are gonna say that, why are you talking about this? Is there any reason why you should talk about this? And and your channel hasn't been affected by this, stop talking about it. But I just want to bring awareness to this topic because people probably don't know what it is. And people who are interested in the topic um, would probably like some more information, if that makes any sense, because I'm not because I just don't know much about the system. But what I do know is that, people are just getting taken down for no reason, or people are taken down because of a particular piece of content that, that isn't up to standard with YouTube's algorithm. But, it's not affected me a lot. It's affected me just a little bit with my older videos. But the fact of the matter is that it's flawed. It really is flawed. And considering that there's people affected by this, mostly reaction channels, by the way, to the people that have reacted to certain content or reacted to, you know, particular people. I'm sorry that that this has happened, but I'm sorry that this has happened. I hope things do turn around. But, there's two reaction channels in particular I watched uh, a long time ago. I'm not gonna mention their names because, I just want to spread awareness about this, but I don't want to mention their names in capacity because, I just don't feel like it's right to do it. So, and just because, to respect their privacy. And these two reaction channels did do content of like where they reacted to TV shows and movies. So they reacted to shows like Adventure Time, Steven Universe, Teen Titans Go, people may be interested in. But like I said, YouTube, and I probably think the third parties probably decided to, take down their video because, they they didn't own that content. In which, yes, it is true, they didn't own the content, but what they really did for that is, what they really did is, transform the work and, put their own little spin on it. That's not really that bad if you think about it. There's a bunch of that do this sort of thing, and it's really good, and some of them react, madely, but I'm kind of interested in that particular set of content, because I watch it quite a lot. And that probably goes the same for video games, for video game content, uh, like in the past, like the video game content was heavily just being like taken down, just just taken down immensely, like back when YouTube was like in its prime, like 2011, 2012, or the very least 2018, 2017. at the very least. But I really don't remember much on that. But but uh, but game companies were really just taboo on that part. People showing game footage, or people just talking about a game, maybe, you know and just showing off what the game could do. But yeah, that was back then. And I and it's not happened a lot now, as it seems, but it did happen a lot then. And I really just want to spread awareness to, yes, this could happen, and it could really potentially be really bad. And I I speak because I've been affected a little bit of this myself. And it's been affected, not to a very big degree, but a very small degree, to where you know I got acclaim for music and stuff. Um but just the fact that this keeps going on, and that it hasn't been fixed at all, is just really flabbergasting. Because at the end of the day, people get affected by this day in and day out, and it's just something that YouTube needs to fix, at the very least ASAP. Right now, we're gonna go back to memory lane, where I have memories of just handheld systems, and in particular the 3DS. So I remember that I got the 3DS when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and I know that I was very entertained by it. I was just over the moon with just getting the system, and just putting my all into just playing and having fun. And those are the days, when I go ahead and play those games. It really brings out something in me that i just I just had when I was little. At that point, I didn't know much about gaming mechanics, or just how the game functioned. But I got a pretty good idea, because I had fun with it. I learned it, I experienced it. And um by the time it was like 7 or 8 years old, I don't remember what age I got my 3DS, to be honest with you. But I had a lot of fun with it. Many games came out that I never got to experience, but while I didn't get every game that was on the 3DS, there were many games that I saw, that I got, that were very much fun. And even years later, when I did find out about the Switch Online, where it came with the Game Boy Advance, with the Game Boy, with the NES, SNES classic of games, where those particular games I got introduced to by this particular service. And there's some games on the SNES that I got introduced for, not a lot, not really a lot, because, well, we didn't really get games that much. We really didn't. And I'm really like glad that I got to experience most of the nostalgia, and just the experiences that people had when playing these select. And these are new to me, and probably some new to you as well. I really could say that. And it brought about a new genre. It really brought about a few select games that were really interesting. And you know, I really liked to bring that experience. I really like bringing that experience to you all, and I really like experiencing that myself as well, because you know, those things were something that I really wanted to get for a long time, but never really did, because I never really asked for it at all, because I just stuck with my few select games that I got. Thank you so much for watching another episode of the After Game Unwind podcast. If you want to go back to a certain topic in the episode that you liked, there will be timestamps below suggesting where you go to that particular point in time to view that specific topic. And if you enjoy the podcast and my other existing content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, as that helps out a ton for your support for the podcast and even existing and new content coming out soon. Thank you very much for your time. Happy gaming and happy travels.